Hi friends, Shereese here, and today we interview one of the co-writers of Season 6, Episode 7, Rascals. Listen in to get a hot take on the original script versus what we saw on screen, and take a trip down memory lane with one of the OGs of the science fiction industry. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea, and today we are dropping a special Escape Pod episode to talk about a fan favorite episode with a fan favorite person, I think. And if you don't know who she is, you're about to find out. Shereese, who's our special guest today?
Today, we would love to welcome our special guest, Diana Botsford, who is one of the writers for the episode Rascals. That's the one when Picard, Keiko, Guinan, and Ro all get turned into kids, but somehow, even as kids, they take over the ship from the Ferengi, and it's awesome. So Diana is a writer, producer, and an instructor, and her primary writing focus is on science fiction for a variety of mediums, including books, films, television, theater, and comics. She's also worked on like a bajillion shows, including Inspector Gadget, which I think is so fun.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I love that.
We are honored to have her in this Escape Pod episode to talk about the process and the experience of writing this episode. Diana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to geek out with others.
Yay. It's just a big nerd pod that we're having right now.
Now, are we nerds or are we geeks or are we both? You guys are both scientists.
So, we're doing both. I'm doing both.
The nerd badge. I'm a geek. I appreciate you guys.
I didn't realize there were like levels on the nerddom hierarchy, but okay, sure. It tracks. It tracks, I guess.
It's not the first time I've been asked that question. And I'm always like, both. I don't know the distinction, so I'm going to take the badge of both.
Diana, the first thing that we always do when we have a guest is we ask them what their favorite Star Trek character is. Now, you have a long history with sort of all of the treks, so I guess you don't have to keep it to TNG, but who's your favorite character and why?
It's Worf, unequivocally, which is TNG, but then Deep Space Nine, like, wow. I mean, you're talking about, in the entire franchise, my opinion is that there is no other character with as deep and incredible a backstory as his. Mm-hmm. There is just this certain wounded, the wounded warrior, attempting to persevere. I mean, you know, I worked with Denise Crosby, ironically, on a pilot shortly after she left Next Generation. But I honestly think Tasha Yar, I think her coming back as the Romulan version was much cooler. Yeah, they did more with her. I think it was the best thing that could have happened for Worf was being able to step out of the shadows and become a critical part. And of course, when he moved to Deep Space Nine and the hair grew long and, you know, and
we love long hair Worf. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, also, I mean, whenever I describe my husband to anybody, my husband also has very long hair. So my husband and a beard, my husband's like a white Worf. That's the way I describe him. And the big, you know, he's got the broad shoulder.
Right.
I married him because he's just like the most ethical, honorable person on the planet. And that's why Jadzia married, you know, Worf also. So, or one of the reasons. Right. So Worf, I just think everything that's been done for him and in the novels too, what they've done for him. And I'm so excited. By the time this streams, Picard will have come out.
Yeah.
It's not completed yet, but it will have come out. And the pieces that I've seen, the photos, the interviews, the little snippets, it looks like they're really going to give him his due, as they should.
Yeah. It feels like the Frasier effect where, you know, Frasier was a character introduced at Cheers. He was a little bit insufferable, maybe a little bit more than insufferable, and like kind of a, you know, one-dimensional character in Cheers. And then Frasier was a spinoff and everybody was like, how's this going to work? Like, you don't have the cast of characters with the bar. You don't have all that. And then Frasier became far and away like more popular and successful as a show than like its predecessor. So
which is saying a lot because Cheers had enormous ratings.
Huge. Cheers was huge.
It was huge, but people quote Frasier to this day.
I mean,
People don't quote Cheers anymore.
I still do. I mean, I still do. Like, Frasier is one of my favorite shows to go back and watch. It's still hilarious. Like, the writing is so tight that, like, the humor, even from 20 years ago, is still, like, so spot on. But it's the Frasier effect in DS9, I think, where you get those TNG characters that you like or love, and then they just become these, like, fully fleshed out characters. So,
and again, this is why Worf is so fabulous, because he has 2 series worth of backstory to play into it. But giving credit where credit is due, back to TNG, you know, this is where they took somebody, a whole species that was a bad guy in the original Klingons, and made them into tentative
allies. Yeah,
exactly. Allies. A lot of that credit goes to Dorothy Fontana, DC Fontana, as she was known in the original series. She was a writer on the original show, went by DC because it was the 60s. And let's not remind the people at home too much that women are working on the show, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God, how ridiculous.
And I had the good fortune to meet her. I worked in visual effects for a while, and I worked with Bob and Denny Skotek, the Academy Award winners, on Terminator 2 and Clifford and Aliens and a whole bunch of stuff. And Dennis was married to Dorothy, and he arranged for a lunch so that I could meet her.
Oh my God.
What an extraordinary human being. What a class act. So gracious. Here I was in my late 20s, just really trying to contain myself because...
Yeah, fangirling.
Yeah, I mean, I was 6 years old when the original series premiered, and I was hugely into science fiction already at that age. I had already read Isaac Asimov's Foundation. I was really born as a geek. And... you know, to get to sit with this woman who we had very few women role models in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, and Wonder Woman just didn't do it for me. I had a problem with that skimpy little outfit. It just like, you know,
she couldn't save the day unless her boobs were showing.
Yeah, I'm not into
that was like a trope. I don't know.
I get people are into lipstick feminism. I'm like, I think there's other ways we can make this work. But she had such a wild imagination. She had such a great imagination. And it's obvious how that translated to original series.
Yeah.
And what they did with the Klingons in Next Generation was just tremendous.
Because in season 1 and 2, they were like, we're warriors. We die in battle. Arr! And you're like, okay. I feel like we've seen this a lot, you know, but yeah, they really do kind of ripen that fruit really nicely.
They do. But it is worth going back to watch those initial ones, because that is where the yeast for the bread was sown, as far as Worf's struggles with being of 2 worlds and therefore being of none, the man without a country.
Yes, he's a third culture kid. That's like,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
By the way, you're speaking to a bread baker, so I'm like, yeast, I'm in.
I was into sourdough a year before COVID hit. I broke my wrist, and like my right wrist, and I couldn't do anything. So I decided to pick it. I love to cook. So I decided to pick it up, and I got into it. So when COVID hit and suddenly everybody's into it, I'm just sitting back laughing.
Yeah. Do you have a name for your starter, by the way?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Sally Rise. After the astronaut, Sally Ride.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that.
So for those of you who don't know, people who make sourdough, we have to keep a sourdough starter alive. And like the longer you keep it alive, the better your bread gets. So you basically like dump out half of it's basically just like flour and water, right? You start with a little starter, and like for me, every 2 weeks, because I keep it in the fridge, like you dump out half and then you add, you have to weigh like your flour and your water, you mix it back in. So it's got more like fuel, right? For the yeast to bubble and do its thing. So sourdough bakers usually name their starter. So I have 2 starters, and one is Will Wheaton because it's a wheat bread. And the other is Robert Picardo because he's the actor who plays the Doctor on Voyager.
I am not someone who cooks, nor will I start after this inspiring conversation. But I do want to name something after something that I keep around, because I just love this whole conversation. Gotten off the rails just a little bit.
We've got about
I love the conversation.
200,000 kilometers off the rails right now.
to our starboard.
To our starboard bow.
Yeah, I still don't know what those mean, by the way. Let's bring it back to Rascals. So you co-wrote Rascals with your dad, which is really, really cool because
So
both Andrea
cool.
and I started watching Star Trek TNG with our dads.
Yep.
So it's like a very, it's got a lot of warm feels. So the fact that you co-wrote an episode with your dad is like, oh, I would have loved to do. I mean, my dad wasn't a writer, but like just the idea of that is really, really cool. So I'd love to know kind of how this came about where you two were writing this episode. That's my first question. And then my second question, which I know you want to get into, is how did what you wrote differ from what we saw?
Just a little bit.
Okay. Buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, buckle up indeed. A head warp factor 1. So we actually wrote the episode back in 1981. And
wow.
The original title was Maker of Dreams. It was a kind of a nod to Shakespeare's Tempest.
Oh, interesting.
The alien character was named Caliban. And I'll get into all that in a minute. But besides the fact that we were both, my father and I were on the phone every day going, oh my God, Next Generation had another episode. Wah! We both were crazy for it. Owned all of the novels.
So cool.
And my daughter was born in 1989. And is that right? 1989. And so yes, 1989. So, here it's my father's first grandchild, and it was kind of an inspiration for us as well. And my daughter was really into Star Trek Next Generation as well. Her favorite was Data until the two-parter where they find Data's head.
Oh,
that was it. She turned her back on science fiction. Literally, she was like 4 or 5 when that episode aired.
Listen, that Mark Twain episode scars yet another victim. Okay.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this. She was so traumatized. She literally just screamed, and I had to shut the TV down.
Oh, it is pretty scary. If you were 4 or 5 and you had a decapitated head.
That was the inspiration for writing something about children. However, it was that plus, if you'll remember, in the first couple of seasons, Picard comes across as not liking children.
Yes.
So
and he says he doesn't like children many, many times.
Right. So our episode was about exploring that. And it got into an incident that happened. There were flashbacks to the Stargazer and how he lost children. And how he feels they're so precious. And he does not agree with Federation Starfleet policy to have children on a starship.
Thank you.
I don't agree with that. I also don't.
Let's go fight the Borg. Buckle the kids up, please.
Yeah, I know.
Borg and no seatbelts. Right. Like, come on. So it
was about that preciousness of a child. And then, it was also, and this was before Alexander had come along too. Mm-hmm. So in our version, the people that become, the crew that become kids are completely different. And there's no row yet either.
Oh, interesting.
The first draft.
Yeah.
So we had it that it was Troy that became a child, Worf became a child, Riker became a child, and Lieutenant Ariana is my daughter's name. So
so we have a new character.
Right. So it was those 4 that became children. And as children, when they appeared on the transporter, at first it appears it's a transporter accident, but it turns out it's not a transporter accident because, oh my God, what a crappy Deus Ex Machina. I mean, that made me nuts when they wrote the script and they made it be this magic wand transporter accident thing. It was embarrassing, to be perfectly frank. We had it that there was basically a predecessor to Odo in a way, a metamorph on the planet named Caliban that not only could he morph himself, but he could affect others.
Oh my God.
What happened is
that's
that
so much cooler.
These 4 really cool. were on the planet on an away mission, and it was a planet with a lot of snow. And Riker, being from Alaska, was thinking very fondly of his time in the snow.
Okay.
I'm a huge snow fan. I spent 2 weeks in Antarctica doing research for Stargate SG-1 novel. We can talk about that later, but I love
Holy
Snow.
crap. Okay,
Love
I just want to like be your assistant and follow you around.
Anyway,
And I just want to
they were
see
thinking
the
about
pictures on
being kids.
Instagram.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, I just want to see the pictures on Instagram when you and Andrea go to exotic places.
Come back to Antarctica with me.
I would listen, as a marine biologist, I'm like, you say Antarctica and I say how high, okay? Like, yeah.
It's pretty extraordinary down there. The krill are like, wow, they're yeah, and
cool.
Also all the sea mammals and stuff. It's really cool. What was it? But
so Riker was kind of reminiscing about his
so
Alaska
Riker's
childhood.
reminiscing about wanting to be a child. Troy and Ariana were throwing snowballs at Worf.
Mhm.
And then they get beamed aboard, and none of them have adult memories in our version.
Oh.
And their clothes don't shrink down to their size. They are like swimming in adult clothes. And
I always wondered about that.
Yeah.
With the transporter accident, I'm like, your clothes are the right size roughly for you two? Like
They made the sleeves a tad longer.
yeah, but that's about it.
to
Yeah.
try to show, oh look, their uniforms don't fit. But you're like, but they mostly fit.
Yeah, the
They're
shoulders
almost, like,
the
perfect.
shoulders fit, and like the pants waist are fine, but your sleeves are a little
The
long.
seams are perfect. Like the neckline's great. The hem is pretty good. I mean, it's just a little bit longer of a sleeve. I think that's fine. We
Yeah,
don't need
it
new
was,
uniforms.
you know,
Actually, we can tuck that in.
Having listened to your guys' coverage on the show, it actually helped me to make a little peace with what they did. It really was, in a way, Next Generation's version of I'm Mud or Trouble with Tribbles. It had that ad-lib feel to it and that silliness and ridiculousness to it. That wasn't our intent. We were trying to do something more profound, to be perfectly frank. But this is what it became. We had Ferengi too, but they weren't so stupid. What can I say? They
Ferengi
really
are so stupid. They're
But
so
they made
stupid.
all the adults stupid, as you said.
Mhm.
And you're right. And they did. And we didn't do it that way. In fact, by halfway through our story, both Riker and Worf are adults again because they have found the metamorph. But then the metamorph gets captured by the Ferengi and they're threatening to kill him. And Guinan knows him, so that complicates things. It was just its own more...
I just want a whole novel of this.
Yeah, I've actually a couple of times thought about proposing to Pocketbooks that they let me write the novel.
I feel like it's and you know what? It wouldn't feel like Rascals at all. So it wouldn't feel like, oh, we're just doing like a rewrite of Rascals or whatever, which is ironic because Rascals was a rewrite of your original story. But that, oh my God, it does seem so much more profound.
Well, I
like
think
losing their adult memories too. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there are some funny lines. No surprise, mostly from Worf.
Yeah.
There's the line when they first get beamed back aboard and everybody's like in shock and all that. And then they're brought one by one as children into the ready room for an interview to try to figure out what the hell is going on. Because they don't even have their counselor anymore. She's a tiny little 3-4-year-old. Okay.
Yeah.
So they bring Worf in and they're like, what happened down there? And Worf says, I do not like snowballs.
I was going to say, it sounds like the Robin Hoodie, like, I am not a merry man.
Right, exactly. It's, we had fun. I mean, Worf is always fun because first off, Michael Dorn is such a great actor. He can do the comedy, he can do the drama.
Yeah.
Cannot wait to see what they bring with him now. But this would have been a child actor. And like I said, this was before Alexander, who I wish they had done more with Alexander. Yeah,
Alexander
were there.
Alexander is definitely not a fan favorite. I like Alexander, but most people despise him. Understandably so. He's kind of an annoying kid. But in this episode, he wasn't. He was super helpful.
He was actually
made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense. It was like, it was all about kids. Like it really made sense. And I think the story you're telling sounds really, serious and profound and kind of, reminiscing about childhood and being a kid again and what that's like. The direction they took it in was very campy and fun and playful. It's just a different story. It's a totally different story. And the thing that was similar was that crew members become kids. And I think that's probably it.
And the
and Ferengi are involved in some kind of way.
Right.
That's probably it as far as similarities. Everything else about these stories, the feel, the tone, what actually happens, the characters, like, is completely different.
Yeah, and at the time, they hadn't done anything with the Stargazer. I think in the later seasons, they do go back into the Stargazer a little.
They had one in season 1 where the Ferengi, this Ferengi wanted revenge against Picard, so he, like, did some kind of brain manipulation with some giant orb, and he kept turning it up higher and higher to make Picard hallucinate that he was on the Stargazer. Yeah. I forget why they did that.
Because the Stargazer fired on this Ferengi ship, and that captain, that Ferengi, his son was on that Ferengi ship and was killed. Mm-hmm. So that's his, like, revenge. But yeah, you're right. It's, I just, even going back to the characters that you had written, I love the idea of Troy being a child. I love the idea of Riker being a child, because Riker is, he's so playful, right? Even as an adult, that I could see him kind of embracing it more, like the way Guinan embraced it in the show that aired. And I love Worf as a child, because I could see him as, like, the Rolaren character. That's like, I don't want to be a kid. I'm not a kid. Like, this is not, or having a really difficult past, right? With his, like, father, Kittimer, and all of that kind of backstory, right? Like, I would have loved to have seen baby Worf, as a very resentful child who's, like, resisting what's happening,
I would have loved to see Worf. I completely agree with you, and I think he would be the Rolaren of the group, who's like, I was never a child and I don't want to be one now. Yeah. But I would have loved to see him not be that way. I would have loved to see him be a child and actually, like, get a second chance, the way Ro did at the very end of the episode when she was coloring and she was like, oh, I'm coloring a picture of my mom. She got to kind of feel a little bit like a kid. I would have loved to see young Worf interact with Alexander and become friends in some kind of a way.
Where they find some common ground.
Some common ground. So when he became an adult again, he wasn't so like, Alexander, why are you this? Why are you that? Be more of a warrior,
Riker would have been the Guinan in this case. I mean, in the novels that they've gone on to do, Riker and Worf have a really good friendship. So that would have been a way to have explored that at a child level. Mm-hmm. And I think you could have had a lot of fun with that.
I think there are two kind of types of people in the world. There's a type of person who, as an adult, can remember what it was like to be a kid and can kind of empathize with kids more, I think. And then there are those who sort of were like Rolaren, it's like, I was never a kid. Or if I was, like, I don't, like, my adult life has, all of that memory has sort of taken over, right? So, like, Riker would be the first person to remember what it's like to be a kid, because he remembers what it's like to be a kid now as an adult, right? And I think you're right. Like, for Worf to kind of, like, rediscover what it feels like to be a kid, where you're one, like, you have no autonomy, like, you're completely powerless against whatever the adults want to do or want you to do, right? Like, you don't have any agency, really. And, like, for Worf to remember what that must feel like and then to relate that to Alexander would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, because he was an orphan himself.
Because the idea of not having autonomy, I mean, I'm from a different generation, and I can tell you that, I mean, I had a mixed childhood. I was bullied in school every day. But when I got home to my apartment building, I was friends with everybody in my apartment building, and we played Star Trek, and I played Captain Kirk.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
And my home childhood, I felt a total sense of autonomy. But this was a different age. You didn't have 24/7 news. You didn't have people who think the Constitution is a piece of paper you can crumble up and put in a birdcage. You had, I lived in New York City in a bubble that literally had people in it from every continent.
That's cool.
Antarctica. I mean, we had people from Kenya and from Morocco and from China and from Korea and Japan and from France and Denmark. And you know what I'm saying? They were from every
really cool melting pot
bubble, right? Where all of the issues that are still going on 50, 60 years later were not going on. I was safe walking home. On Wednesdays, I would skip the bus and I would walk the 3 miles home and take $1 to buy a candy bar and a comic book and play a pinball game.
Oh my God, how fun.
And I was completely safe. So I think that was an age where children did feel more of a sense of autonomy.
I will say I grew up, both of my parents were immigrants. My dad has already passed away, but he immigrated from Europe and my mom immigrated from South America. And immigrant parents in general tend to be a little bit more guarded with their kids, right? Because it's like, I don't know this country very well. I don't know the social norms and whatever. So we were a lot more restricted in our movements. There was no like autonomy. I mean, I could go ride my bike on the street in front of the house, but like once the street lights came on, you have to come inside. But we couldn't go far. You couldn't go off the block. Like that was it. But the one thing that we could do was we had a family friend who had a house on Catalina Island, which is a little island not far off the coast of SoCal. It's like a hour boat ride away.
Did my honeymoon there.
Oh, it's super cute. The island itself is a decent size, but there's only like one town on it called Avalon, which I love the like background of like, the Knights of the Round Table kind of thing. Anyway, but Avalon is so small, you can walk all the way around it in like 15 minutes flat. And that was the one place my parents said, go crazy. Like, you don't have to check in with us. Go do whatever you want. Like, literally, where are you going to go? We're on an island in a town that's the size of a thimble. Okay. Like, so my sister and I would be like, we're going to go to the beach. We're going to go to like this little cafe and get, they'd give us a couple bucks and we'd go get like a Blue's frozen banana or like a something, right? Where it's like, that was the space to feel totally free. And every time we got to go there, I felt so happy because it gives me that enterprise feel where it's like, where are you possibly going to go and get lost? You can't get lost.
Yeah. I mean, Enterprise was like a floating hotel in a way.
Yeah. Yes, it totally was.
But if you'll notice, as it went out of the series into the movies, the designs,
yes,
the next Enterprise was more militaristic. The bridge
much more
militaristic. And I think they moved away from even showing us in the movies children being hurried down the corridor.
Yes, yeah.
Get out of ways, harm's way during a red alert. I think.
Where are they putting these kids exactly? That's what I want to know.
The schoolroom.
No seatbelts. Yeah, it's like, oh no, the Ferengi are attacking. Go to class.
Go to your quarters.
This is just not safe. Like.
And that's why you don't bring kids on your ship.
That's again what my cousin was saying. He was just like, well, the reason is because I didn't know this because he's a military person. I'm not. But he said in the Navy, you actually can have your family on board at certain periods of time. Yeah, like not when they're going to war,
right.
But when the ship is like docked and it's doing maintenance for 3 months or whatever, like your family can be on board. And I was like, really? And he was like, yes, because you could be deployed for months. You could be deployed for years, and you want to be able to see your family.
Yeah.
So if these people are going on deep space missions for 7 years, like the Enterprise was, that means they're not going to see their families for 7 years. That's unreasonable. So that's why families are allowed.
What are we fighting for?
Exactly.
What is all the effort for? And, our children are precious. Should the children, could they have come up with a better plan for how to protect the children? Yes.
I have no idea.
But there was one thing they did in Next Generation that was very clever, and that was the saucer separation.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that. I love the saucer separation. You only see it a couple of times, and every season as a kid, I was like, "Is it going to happen again?" Like, I just wanted to see that with the like dun da 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 da. As it separates, like, oh, it's so great.
It was clever because then you could take the children and the civilians and people who weren't qualified, like biologists.
Yeah.
Take them and get them off to safety while the saucer went off to battle. So that, I guess, is the compromise, because what are we fighting for if it's not for our families?
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
For the arts. You've seen all of these arguments before. So, I think, but still, children are precious, and that's what we wanted to get into. And they can, when they're behaving themselves, they can bring out the best in us.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the worst in us.
It's a fun little flip of a coin.
That was the other thing with the Ferengi that really got me with Rascals versus Our Draft, is that they made them so stupid. And I loved how in Deep Space Nine, thank you, Armin Shimmerman and Aaron Eisenberg, rest in peace, and all of those folks, how they really, they elevated the Ferengi culture. Now, I know there's been issues of concerns of anti-Semitism, and I think they are a little valid. I think there's more they could have done to give it more dynamic range. I think Quark's brother, who ends up being the new Nagus, was their way of doing that. But my God, in Rascals, they're like cartoon characters. They're so dumb.
They're really dumb. And then they keep like threatening to like murder all the kids. And you're like, oh gosh, that's like, yeah. And it's just like such a brutal thought even, you know, and they're just like, well, if you didn't want us to murder your kids, you shouldn't have brought them on the ship. And you're like, I guess, but like, why are you going around murdering kids regardless of where they are?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah.
How does that lead to profit?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It was really weird. So, okay, on that note, just like, so you said you were able to make peace with how they decided to create this episode. Now, given the chance in a perfect world with a magic wand, would you go back and change this episode to be what you originally created? Or would you?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I think there's so much story that over the 7 years never got explored as to Picard's issues with children. I mean, yes, they had that episode later on where he's with those kids in the, the turbo
Jeffrey's in the turbo lift, yeah.
And it's a start, definitely. But I think exploring, Riker had a tragic childhood too, you know?
Yes, with the death of his mother, yeah.
Right, death of his mother. Worf had a really tragic childhood, you know? And then Troy had this cuckoo pants mother. You know? So what would little Troy be like not under the thumb of Luoxana Troy?
Yeah.
You know, and that was interesting too to be explored. So I absolutely would like to see the original version done. But, you know, I think I got to thank you for the coverage you did on Rascals, because you really helped me to get some distance on it and see, you know, it's their I'm Mud episode.
Yeah. You know, I love hearing this backstory from you, and I'm so thankful that you agreed to sit down with us and talk about this with us, because, you know, whenever we review an episode, part of the homework that I do is I go back and I look at like production history notes on each episode. And there are always, you know, I don't think I've ever seen a single episode that I've done, you know, a review on that didn't have like rewrites and things like that happen. But I'm just kind of curious, you know, how did the rewriting process even look like? Was this sort of all in one fell swoop, or did they just kind of slowly strip things away from your original story to get to the Rascals that aired? Or was it just like, hey, we're doing a whole rewrite and we're losing all of these components?
Well, what happened was, as I said, is that the script was bought in 1981. It was one of the last scripts that Gene Roddenberry bought, spec scripts that he bought before he passed away. And those early years of Next Generation were the last time in Hollywood history that spec scripts were invited, that people were invited to submit pre-written scripts without having pitched them first.
That's amazing.
So my father and I wrote it, and we submitted it, and then it was bought, and then it was shelved, and then 3 years went by. We didn't hear a thing. Roddenberry died. You know, there was a change in management, as it were, in the writing room.
Yep.
And the next thing we know, it's happening. We had nothing to do with the rewrite. I will tell you that there are so many versions of who actually was the one who rewrote it. It wasn't Michael Piller. I know who it was, because I brought him to the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America Nebula Awards as our speaker one year, and that's Ron D. Moore. I brought Ron in, and Ron was the one who rewrote that thing.
Okay.
And Ron had gone on in interviews to complain about the original story having a transporter accident. So I gave him so much crap about
Ron,
because I was like,
what the hell?
That's not true. You know that's not how we did it. Why are you putting the blame on us? That's crap. So I'm trying to keep you from getting an explicit rating here. So
oh no, it's fine.
Our show is explicit.
Yeah, I swear all the time. Yeah.
Good. Well, that was total bullshit. That was absolute bullshit, because that's not what happened. It's very clear in the script that's not what happened. But, you know, I suspect what happened is that the writers didn't want to do it. They didn't want to, they forced it into that Home Alone thing. They didn't want to deal with children. I mean, they tell you in the industry, the two things you never want to work with is animals and children.
Yeah.
You know, I would argue that that's no longer true. I mean, I think we've all seen multiple shows with extraordinary children actors like, oh my God. Hello, Bella Ramsey, Last of Us, just the latest in a long run.
Good Lord, I know, right?
God, these children are just blowing my mind. And, you know, having a dog of my own, I can tell you dog training has come a long, long way. So, you know, even animals, it's a different world now than it was 30 plus years ago. But I think they were forced into it, and I think they just decided to fully embrace the Home Alone trope and just go with it and be ridiculous, make it their own I Mud, as it were, or their own, you know, Trouble with Triples, and just be ridiculous. And that's the direction they went with it. And I mean, we were invited to come back and pitch more with Jerry Ryan, who went on to do Voyager.
Yes. Yeah.
I was invited. I got a phone call after that, and I was invited to come on as a WGA, a Writers Guild of America intern.
Okay.
And I had to turn it down because it paid like $200 a week. I was a single mother, and I was working, I was in pre-production as a visual effects supervisor for Terminator 2.
Whoa.
A little bit more money. So, and I owned a house. So, you know, you do the math, and I hated turning it down. And God, Jerry Ryan was just an incredible human being. She just a class act, really. I hated turning it down. That's definitely one of the very few regrets in my life. But, you know, I mean, but this is what happens. I have worked on other series as a producer. I was a producer on a CBS series called Hearts of the West with Bo and Lloyd Bridges.
Oh,
and
God.
I repeatedly saw scripts come in from outside writers. And then by the time the in-staff writers got done with it, it was like, I tell my screenwriting students, because I teach screenwriting at the college level, and I tell them that frequently what you'll see is this beautiful, profound indie story of two nuns in Idaho will end up being about two cops in New York City.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to Rascals. And that's what's happened to many other, you know, it's part of the business. It's just the way the business works.
Yeah.
Now, I find that people who are Trekkers or Trekkies, that there's this just certain honorable ethic going on because it was so formative in raising them. And it's a shared language. I mean, I almost wish it was required watching in all this.
I know.
Help with ethics, you know.
It really, you know, there's Shereese and I have spoken, you know, we have a lot of friends who are all Trekkers or Trekkies or however people want to identify. And one of them, one of our friends, she says she falls asleep to Voyager every night or like DS9 every night because it helps her kind of like dream of like the better world that we could be. And I think that is such a powerful message. And, you know, I feel like very early seasons of TNG, Shereese can attest to this. Like there's always like a moral of the story. And Shereese is like, I hate the moral of the story. Like, stop trying to write.
I despise the moral of the story because it's like, it's telling me as a viewer that you're too stupid to understand what I was trying to tell you. So let me tell you in words. You should be nice to people. Yeah. It's like, get out of here, man.
I got that. I got that from watching
I got it. I totally caught that. Thanks. Yeah. Caught it.
I mean, you know, they have to appeal to a wide audience, both people who are aware enough like yourself, but also those who not so much. But, you know, I mean, we need story to survive and thrive as a civilization.
Right. And I think the stories are really strong. And so not so much in season 1, but in the other seasons, I think the stories are really strong and they stand alone. And I love the fact that I love it when it's more open to interpretation because there are a lot of morals that you can pull from each episode. For example, there's an episode in season 1 called Symbiosis where you think this planet is dying from some terrible disease. This other planet has the
medicine
treatment for the medicine for the disease.
Such a good episode.
Find out that the sufferers are actually addicted to drugs and that the healers are actually drug dealers and that they think they're going to die if they don't have the drugs, but really it's just withdrawal. And so there's so many moral and ethical issues with this symbiosis, with this mutual relationship these two planets have formed. And I like that at the end of the episode, it ends and you can kind of think about it from a lot of different angles of like, was that right? Was that wrong? What should they have done? As opposed to them just being like, well, kids, that's why you shouldn't do drugs. It just feels like you're really closing the door to all that you can extract.
But that was the style of the era. It was called, as a screenwriting professor, I'm repeating myself here, but it was called Gilding the Lily.
That
last scene where everybody's, usually on the bridge. And they did this in the original series too, where at the end, they're all patting each other on the back and they re-spell out in overly simplistic words what the moral of the story is. And we've moved away from that because audiences have gotten more sophisticated. I mean, you watch Game of Thrones, except for that last season.
We shall not speaketh the name. Yeah,
exactly. And even Star Trek itself evolved. I mean, by the time Deep Space Nine's final scenes, they still sort of did the same thing, but they would do it in sneakier means. You also had, you had the great Ira Stephen Bear running Deep Space Nine by the time it got into the third season, and he was not going to stand for that everybody standing around and patting each other on the back bananas stuff. It's just not going to happen. But
it does change the tone of a show. It makes it feel a little more sitcom-y. And there's nothing wrong with a sitcom. But I know DS9 had a more serious tone. Yeah. But even at the end, even after maybe like season 2, early middle season 2, they stopped doing that, which I really appreciate. And they started ending with maybe it's two characters in, the observation lounge looking out the window or something like that, where it's like a reflective moment.
Yes.
So there still isn't a period at the end of the sentence, but it's more realistic because I know when I come home at the end of the day and I'm reviewing what happened with my day, I don't go, and that's why we all need to be friends. I don't do that, but I do maybe stare out the window. Right. I don't. Probably because I don't have kids. That's literally the only reason. I don't end every single day with a moral.
See, I end every single day thinking I only got like half done of what I wanted to get done today. Every day of my life now is like that. It's like, I need to go at warp speed, man. It's not. But, the 90s were a very interesting transition for storytelling and television. And I think we owe a lot more to Next Generation and then Deep Space Nine as far as all TV is concerned because of what they did. I mean, even Next Gen in the later seasons got a little more serialized. Deep Space Nine certainly got serialized. And now that's like the,
Now that's the thing.
Now it's not. Now it's not just standalone little capsules that have nothing to do with each other. Exactly. It's like now we have more long form storytelling. Now we have character growth and development. It doesn't just restart from zero every episode. Well, that just speaks volumes to the power of great science fiction and specifically Star Trek, because here, if we think about just what Star Trek TOS originally was, it was 3 seasons. People are flying around in a spaceship and interacting with aliens and pew, pew, pewing, and that could have just ended just there, right? But instead, it inspired legions and legions of people to write further stories, furthering the stories of these characters, right? And like into TNG and DS9, where it's like, there aren't a whole lot of series that will inspire such an uprising of like more creative content. And that I think really speaks to what Gene Roddenberry like tapped into with people. Like he tapped into something so deep with people that it created an entire culture that still, 50 years later is still like it's still just taking off. Like, which is amazing. Oh my God.
Yeah,
amazing.
It is amazing. And it's, what I think is particularly cool talking about children in Rascals is seeing these second generations, Rod Roddenberry.
Yes.
Leonard Nimoy's son's directorial debut was on the Rascals. And, you're seeing some of these other children of first generations that got into it. You can't shake the dream and the vision, the hope.
This ladies and gentlemen, is a lady who knows her track. Holy moly. I mean, see, this right here too, just even this conversation serves to separate like Shereese and I as fans of the show, right? As super fans, and you who were like, you were in the trenches. You know what I mean? Like you were there, you know, these people. This is just, you know, it feels like I'm looking through a kaleidoscope and I'm discovering a whole new universe where like you're talking about DC Fontana and all. I mean, it's like you took Ron D. Moore as like your plus one to this nebula where it's like, what the hell? Like this is like science fiction inception right here. It's crazy. It's crazy and such a pleasure too to get to chat with you about this.
This has been a treat. It is wonderful to meet the two of you. I love what you're doing with this podcast.
Oh my God. From your lips to God's ears, I tell you, that just means so much. We really are just a couple of super fans of TNG who just enjoy having like fun conversations about it. So if it translates well, like it just, that makes all the difference. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
Fun and thoughtful, which I really appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I want to thank you for writing Rascals, even though it wasn't the Rascals that translated, you know, and ended up on screen. I have nieces and nephews, and I'm sure lots and lots of people who are Trek fans have kids in their lives, and Rascals and True Q, like some of the episodes that feature kids are the first ones that I show like to kids because they put themselves, like it puts them in that sort of sci-fi headspace, right? And like it pulls them right in. So writing kids in sci-fi like engenders a whole new generation of sci-fi fans. So thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome.
And
I forgot about True Q. That's a cute episode.
Oh, that's a great one.
It's super cute. It's super cute. And on that note, before we go, I want to let people know where they can find you. And there's a couple different places. So first, you can go to dianabotsford.com, and Botsford is spelled BOTSFORD to find out whatever Diana's working on now, because she's always got something new in the works, some new like yeast brewing wherever it brews. You can also find her. I'm like, does yeast even brew? I don't know. I'm not
like, Shereese, why are you handling this analogy?
I don't know. The analogy just came out. And you know, like when I do a sports analogy and I'm like, but what just happened?
Was that
I don't know what happened.
Girl,
we're great. Go.
The 4-point touchdown. Wait, is that how that goes? That can't be right.
Also, we're talking about volleyball, so I don't know. Okay.
No, right? I know, right? For like match set point. That's not the right sport either. So you can find her on Instagram with @digitalred93. Red is a color. And she's got two things coming up. We'll put the links in the description. But I want to give Diana a chance to talk about the two. And one of them is a short story anthology in a book called Double Trouble. And the second are a series of screenwriting workshops. So Diana, do you want to talk a little bit about Double Trouble?
Yes, absolutely. Because Double Trouble is from the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, of which I am one. I wrote several Stargate SG-1 novels, and there are several Star Trek novel writers that are contributing short stories, including David Mack, Greg Cox, Keith DeCandido. These are names that I will bet many of your listeners know. And I'm also contributing a story that's called Double Trouble. That'll be out in July. We're hoping to do at least some sort of launch at the Star Trek Shore Leave convention in Baltimore in July. So maybe we'll see you there. The other thing is I will be doing for the month of April, will be the first in what I hope is a series of screenwriting workshops online with the Pen Writers Association. And that is, we'll meet once a week for a couple hours, and there'll be mini lectures. That'll be part of that 2 hours, but there'll also be the opportunity to access additional lectures I've created. But the idea is for everybody to work together on developing their scripts, and the last few weeks of the month, we'll be actually workshopping your pages. You'll get to bring your pages you've written to the workshop online in Zoom, and they'll be read out loud by the group, and you'll get live feedback. It is always easier to write when somebody else is on the journey with you. So you can find out about that too at dianabotsford.com.
Yeah, I love this. And, you know, one of my favorite writers, two of my favorite writers, one is C.S. Lewis, and he wrote a ton of amazing like Christian fiction, including the Chronicle of Narnia series. which is like 7 books long. And another one of my favorite authors is J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings. And the two of them were in a book writing club together.
Oh my God.
So like they were buddies cheering each other on as they were writing. So like what Diana's talking about, having those buddies to write with can make all the difference. So definitely check that out. We'll have the links below. And if you are listening to this at a time when those have already passed, that's okay. You can go to Diana's website and see whatever her newest project is coming up. So Diana, thank you so much for being a part of this show, a part of this episode, and for letting us know about your experiences in the industry. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. You guys are great. I look forward to your next podcast.
Thank you so much. We are over here just fangirling really hard over you. So this has been super, super fun. Oh my gosh, I am immediately going to jump online and start ordering some Star Trek novels because I need the story to continue, especially with these characters we love so much. So major, major props to you and to all of the writers who contributed to TNG and all of the different series for making these characters so freaking lovable. It's amazing.
They're special characters. And knock on wood, we're going to see that live on screen again.
Can't wait.
Yeah. So join us next week when we are reviewing something else. We don't know because we're recording this at a different time from when we're going to publish it. So something else will be coming out on Thursday if you're listening to this in real time.
It could be really good or it could be really bad. Who knows?
Totally good. It totally could.
You know what it's not? At least it won't be Aquiel. Okay, because we're done with that.
We're done with that dumpster fire of an episode. But I think, I think it'll most likely be good. So, check us out on Thursday.
All right, guys, thank you so much for nerding out with us. We will catch you next week.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.